Hello, everybody, and welcome back to OutRaised Voices. I'm your host, Sharon Lee Williams, and I'm so happy you're here. If you've been here before, thank you for showing up again. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you are new here, thank you for joining the community, at least today, and I hope to see you down the road, and bring a friend and pass it on. We appreciate you. I thank you very much. So, our CEO today, and for new people here, CEO stands for Conversation, Education, and Outreach. And that's what each of our guests, our CEOs, bring to the table. So that is why I call them CEOs. So our CEO today is Cheyanne Ratnam. Now, I'm going to give you the short bio, but you please read her bio after the show is over. Read her bio because it is extensive. This woman has done a lot. Cheyanne is the co-founder and CEO of the Ontario Children's Advancement Coalition. She's a part-time professor and has dedicated much of her time and expertise in child welfare, as well as homelessness. Now, Cheyanne has also the lived experience of being there. She is a survivor of sexual abuse. She's experienced homelessness, and she's been a young offender. So she's been on both sides of the table, and she is perfect for our voice, to bring her voice to OutRaised Voices. All right, so here is Cheyanne Ratnam. Hello, Cheyanne. Nice to see you. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you very much for saying yes.
Thank you for having me, Sharon Lee.
Yeah, always, anytime, anytime. And I know we had just so everybody knows, we had a little discovery call before this, and we talked about your focus, certainly for you right now, is on success and what that looks like coming from within. And certainly from reading your bio, you are that. You exude that success coming from within. So we're going to bring that to the table. But like I always do with our CEOs, I like to go back. I want to talk about becoming Cheyanne. You know, how did you get into care? What were the circumstances? And we'll go from there.
Sure. I mean, I think everybody has different facilitators that bring them into the child welfare system, and I am no exception. And
Mm-hmm.
my background is that I came to Canada as a refugee with a single mother. And Canada still struggles with this, but they didn't necessarily provide my mother with the right supports. As a single mother, living in poverty with a young daughter. And so basically, poverty precipitated a lot of tension. My mom's mental health went down the drain as well. It
Mm-hmm.
really impacted her. And then that also impacted me. And
Mm-hmm.
all these precipitators and nuances played a role in abuse that was happening within my home, or within the house, because it wasn't safe
Mm-hmm.
for me to be at home.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a multiple ways of being abused. And then on top of that, a very trusted family friend's husband had also been abusing me at the same time. So I was being abused within my home, but also outside my home. And this precipitated a lot of the violence within the home, in terms of, my mom coping the best way that she knows how or knew how. It doesn't excuse anything, but now I understand, right, as an adult, what were the precipitators around that. And yeah, I began experiencing homelessness when I was about 13. And I became really close with my former best friend in high school, grade 9. And that was the
Mm-hmm.
year where I had the privilege, I would say, of having a little bit of freedom that I forced into my life, to be able to escape from the violence in my home. And
That
so
you forced into your life.
I forced
That
it in my life.
you
Yes.
created this pathway into your
Yes.
life. But I just want to take you back a little bit. Did your mom understand? Did your mother understand what was going on in the home? Because I always say we don't know what we don't know, and sometimes blinders come into play. I mean, when we're scared.
Everybody thinks that they understand a situation through their depth of perception. My mother
Hmm.
didn't understand the whole situation. She understood the situation from her perspective, which was
Right.
and that is very true for a lot of people.
Hmm.
And so, because of the, I guess, misalignment in
Hmm.
terms of really understanding the issue and fully supporting me and me not feeling loved in the home, I ended up running away a lot. And that's where the youth homelessness stuff came in. And then I remember one day I had run away again, and I had returned about 2 weeks later. And by the
Ooh.
way, when I say run away, I mean like I was in a safe space where I was with my former best friend's family.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
we're like out, and we were out doing things, but at the end of the day, we were at her home at nighttime, But my
Hmm.
mom was not a fan of this, and like I said, she didn't understand the situation, and things led to me becoming a young offender that night, and that precipitated me into the youth criminal justice system, which is what it's called now. Back then, it was the young offender system. And then eventually I said to the system that I can't go back home. It's not safe. And then I ended up in the group home system. And that's my entry into child welfare.
That's a lot. That's a lot. So you find a home with your best friend's family. And how did they, so let's talk a little bit about them. So how did they say, okay, Cheyanne, we're going to accept this? Do they call your mom? How does that all work?
I don't think they fully understood what was exactly going on. I was just their daughter's best friend, and they're Guyanese, they're West Indian. Uh,
Oh, okay.
their home was open,
Yes.
and they
Always
loved
open.
me.
Food you need, food, come,
And they
come,
loved
come. Yeah.
me, and they loved to have
Yes.
me, and I was
Oh,
actually like the good influence among my former best friend's friend circle. So I was the good person, which is
yeah.
funny because my mom was like, "You're the worst person." So yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Here you are experiencing love with the family that is not your own and struggling in a situation with your biological mom who's trying to probably understand her own sense of what love looks like and how to even give that to you
Yes.
in a situation where you're a single mom and in a different country and so on and so forth. And the rules change with kids when they come into this country and what you are allowed and not allowed to do
Exactly.
in terms of even discipline. It's different. So here you are, loved, and you've mentioned a couple of times. I'm picking former best friend.
Mhm.
Do I jump on that or I don't jump on
Sure.
that?
I mean, you can. I think that, much like what I always say is that everybody has a season and a reason, and some people do,
Right.
some people are forever, but you need to be able to identify when certain friendships need to end. And my friendship with them was very much needed. It's not the fact that I felt love within their home, I felt belonging because no one was talking about my
Belong.
skin tone being dark.
Yes.
Whereas
Yes.
I was facing colorism within my own home.
Yes.
And I just felt like I belonged. And in terms of friendships, it's very important to identify friendships that were born out of survival and
Yes.
whether those survival friendships end at a certain point or they continue,
Yes.
they are also elevating themselves beyond survival. And I noticed that we were all, I was kind of progressing and kind of my life was changing and they were still in the same place. And I had to say goodbye to that friendship, but I'm very grateful for, the role that they played in my life. And I still look at them like family. You can love somebody from a distance, and even if they
Absolutely.
terminated from your life, but it's very important to prioritize your wellness and yourself and your progress. And sometimes that requires you to say goodbye to people.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about colorism, if you can explain to the viewers who don't
Yeah.
know.
I mean, colorism, number one, it stems from anti-Black racism, which is a universal issue. In the North American context, it's a little bit different than the South Asian context. And so in the South Asian context, I would be considered now Black. When I was younger, I was a little bit more lighter, so they would consider me brown. And in my language, there's three different words: white, brown, and black. And I was brown growing up, so I was like, okay. And it was like, oh, she's not black, so it's okay. And now that I'm more tan as I get older, they're like, oh, you got really dark. And so colorism is really about favoring whiteness, and it's rooted in white supremacy culture. And it is not just ingrained in the Black community, it's ingrained in all communities.
Yes.
In the global south and also in the global north, through diaspora, and
Hmm.
also get like if you look through media, right? Media loves white skin. Media loves. I mean, it's only been the last decade, I would say, right, where diversification has actually been happening in media, right, where you see more darker
Hmm.
skinned people and so on and
And
so forth,
models
and models,
and
size, everything. So
thing
colorism is
has just.
really.
Hmm.
Exactly. And colorism is really about not favoring darker people and
Hmm.
also stigmatizing people because of their darkness. So because you're dark, you must be not smart. Because you're dark, you must not be beautiful. Because you're dark, so on, so and so forth.
So how do you now? You're a child. Colorism is there. You don't know that terminology then, and now you're an adult. So how do you come to say, okay, I'm beautiful just the way I am, whatever color I am, whoever? How do you get to that? What are the tools? What are the steps? Or do you find a mentor, or you read a book, or how does that all work?
For me, I always say to people as well is that for me, okay, let me rewind a little bit before I answer your question, okay? Some
Sure, sure.
context. So the first 3 years of a child's life is the most important years of the child's
Yes,
development. That
yes.
those 3 years will be the factors that will play a role in terms of the strength of the young person throughout their lifetime, their ability to be malleable, adaptive, and so on and so forth. And I have to
Hmm.
say, the first 7 years of my life were excellent. My mom was my best friend. And
Wow.
so even though I was facing colorism and so on and so forth, I always knew I was beautiful. What the heck? Like, even though I was being, outcasted in certain ways. Like I remember going to classical Indian dancing classes, and we had the show, and the
Hmm.
teacher put me at the back, although I was like one of the most talented girls, and she had all the
Hmm.
light-skinned girls in the front. So I already knew what colorism was, even though I couldn't label it as colorism.
Right,
But
right,
we
of
know what it
course.
was because people are calling people black, brown, and white. Like, come on, you know? So I,
Well, I'm going to take you back a little bit.
yeah.
I mean, black, brown, and white, and certainly in my generation, it was high yellow and it was red.
Hmm.
We had red skin, high yellow, brown, black. So we had all of that in there.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but just to see how things have
Yeah.
changed a little bit. But are you saying that you were in a family with an East Indian family or?
So my
Uh,
mom's
uh,
side, they're all light skinned. They would be considered whites. My dad's
oh, okay.
side, they are dark skinned. They're darker than me. And they would be considered black. And I was born and I was like in the middle. Now I'm darker. But I think for me, I just always knew that my skin tone didn't matter because number one, I was intelligent, I was smart, I had good features. And I mean, what's to hate when you look like almond and like chocolate? Like, I don't know,
Yeah,
you know?
but who tells you that? Your mom is telling you that. Even though you're experiencing these other things, is your mom saying to you, "You are beautiful."
Oh no, I never heard that in my mom's house. My mom would
Okay.
tell me to scratch my skin harder in the shower to
Oh,
get rid of my dirt. So
wow.
it was really me, for
Yes.
whatever reason,
Yeah.
just having a strong mentality despite
Yeah.
everything. And and like I said, I'm thankful for the early years of my life where
Yes.
I had really great conditions for my development.
Hmm.
Because if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have been able to have that sort of mentality growing up. But my former best friend's family strengthened the fact that I was beautiful, strengthened the fact that like this is like a backhanded compliment almost, but they're like, "Oh, you're really beautiful for a Tamil girl." Like, those backhanded comments, right? And there's West Indian, East Indian, like sometimes kerfuffles and whatever. But even though it was backhanded, I was like, yeah, I do believe that I'm beautiful or whatever. So they did strengthen that aspect of it, even though other people may be like, "Oh, she's dark." So you must make sure that you are smart enough to get married in the future because your looks are not going to
Right.
get you married in the future.
Right. And there is always that conversation. Again, I bring it back to when I was younger. You're not supposed to marry a dark man because you don't want a dark skinned man because you don't want the babies to be too dark because it'll be trouble for them. It'll be hard for them to get a job when they get it. So all of that. And when I hear you say that, I say, really, that is still continuing. I
Oh
mean, I
yeah.
do know that, but it's just so difficult to fathom. What do you think your DNA brought to the table? Because I'm hearing this, I'm hearing you speak so powerfully, and
Mhm.
that first 7 years is important. Now, if you're getting this kind of feedback, your mother is your best friend, but you're still not getting the not necessarily the grounding, but the support you needed. Where do you think? I mean, I understand you have that, but where does DNA come into?
I
Come
mean, number one, the abuse started when I was 7 years old. So everything was very nice until I was 7 years
till
old. And
okay.
then things flipped. One of my uncles was murdered. My mom's mental health was also going down. My mom got into a car accident when I was in grade four. I
Oh.
was sexually abused in grade three and grade four. So a lot of these things happened like all at once. And then that's when the home was not my safe place anymore. And in terms of my DNA, like actually, funny enough, like a lot of people from child welfare may not know what their history is, depending on their
Mm-hmm.
entry into the system. And even though I knew my mom, I only met my dad maybe 7 years ago in my adulthood, like
Mm-hmm.
fairly recently. So I didn't
Mm-hmm.
really have an idea of who he was. All I knew was that my mom hated him, and so therefore I should hate him, and so on and so forth. And it was only recently that I did my DNA test and I found out that, like, yeah, obviously my dad's side, they're very much native to the north of Sri Lanka. And also they're from Tamil Nadu, which is in India. And then
Mm-hmm.
surprisingly, my mom's side, 7, 8 generations back, which is like 800 years ago or whatever, they were Punjabi and Gujarati, and they didn't end up in the south of everything until the 1600s. So it kind
Mm-hmm.
of gave me an idea of, like, even just colorism wise, the
Mm-hmm.
differences. But I have to say that being Tamil, which is a minority population from Tamil Elam or Sri Lanka, um,
Mm-hmm.
gave me a lot of strength because I know that
Oh.
my ancestors who are from the Tamil struggle, from
Yes,
Sri Lanka,
yes.
but also in India, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
being ancient people who were pushed down south. We're
That's
fighters,
right.
we're warriors, and I know that
Mm-hmm.
I am my ancestors' wildest dreams, because I am continuously breaking curses and building generational healing, so
Mm-hmm.
that even if I don't have children myself, maybe I will, at least my influence on other people around me is more positive, right? Rather than I don't know, hurting them or stigmatizing them or whatever.
So you stand on the shoulders of this strength, this vine, this
They're giants.
seed. You know, it's all good. So when you meet your biological father, do you see the similarities? Do you
Oh my
see
gosh.
anything? I asked that.
I literally do not look like my mother's side. I always
Yes.
thought that I was accidentally given to them in the hospital and somebody else
Ah.
did. We do not look anything alike. So growing
Uh-huh.
up, everybody else was beautiful, right? That's what everybody
Uh-huh.
would say, like, oh, look at your cousin. Like, she has milk white skin and she's so
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, who do I look like? Because I don't have any reference points. And then I
Mm-hmm.
remember in 2016, when I first went to Europe to visit or meet my dad. I have three half siblings, and like I met my grandmother for the first time.
Wow.
Uncle, I met like 18 people basically
Oh.
in Europe, and I remember looking at my dad. I'm like, oh, this makes a lot of sense now. Like I literally look like them, very much so. And that really brought some grounding for me, in terms of,
Yes.
who I am and what I look like and the missing pieces, right? In terms of, like, okay,
Yes.
mom said looks like, and oh, this makes so much sense now. So yeah.
Yes, yes. So that kind of it closes the gap and fills that hole a little bit. No matter what relationship is later
Yeah.
on, it's great to. I'm happy for you that you experienced that because I certainly did, and it made a difference in understanding where I belong. Who are my people?
Yeah.
or at least some of them. You know.
And child welfare had a lot of disconnections, right? And I remember
Mm,
in 2017, I actually went to the island for volunteering. So I was
mm.
supporting with the environmental scan, and that was the first time my feet dug into the red sand, like the hot red sand of the island, and hearing like tropical rain and monkeys and bats and whatever.
Oh
And
yeah,
that was
yeah.
the first time I felt connected to my culture and my people, because my
Mhm.
trauma comes from my community, right? In terms of
Yes.
abuse and whatever, whatnot. So I disconnected myself for so long. And so going there actually made me love my people. When I came back, that was when I started to engage more in the Tamil community, and I started to volunteer. I expanded my friends groups. My friendship circles are usually West Indian. And so it was like a first time for me to really love my people to a point where it's like,
Hmm.
yeah, like this is me, this is my people, and I'm ready to come back. And I've done some healing.
Hmm. Hmm. That's wonderful. So I hear you speak. Again, you're just so confident, and I love that. And I'm saying to myself, when you, because I know you've talked about your story, do you find that when you speak about what happened to you, whether it's sexual abuse or homelessness, are you still disconnected to that, or are you just aware of it? It is not, the past is not defining your future and all that. But how did you even cope with that? How do you
I mean, there
what's
was a
coping?
lot of reflection, a lot of time spent alone. When I talk to younger people, I always say that sometimes when we're always outside, always around people, that's a coping strategy.
Yes.
Sometimes if you're seeing yourself do that, you need solitude. That's your ointment. So I had a lot of solitude, and in those solitude moments, I had a lot of reflection, and that's when I did a lot of my healing work. And healing continues lifelong. But when
Yes.
I did go into solitude, I was spending more time with myself, reflecting on things, asking questions to myself. And those, I think for like a couple of years, I did that ongoing. And that really helped me in terms of having more awareness of the precipitating factors, the root causes, and also my background, right? I'm in social work. So
Hmm.
I went through the social service worker diploma program, the bachelor's degree program, and the master's degree program. And all those programs,
Mm.
ask you to reflect on
To
these things.
reflect, yes.
So all these factors played a role in the eventual, I guess, facilitation of me being able to articulate my story without being, I guess, re-traumatized by that story.
Yes,
I can
yes,
talk about myself, and
yes.
I'm not disassociating disassociating myself from that part. When I speak
Hmm.
about it, I'm definitely still present. And
Hmm.
every time I talk about it, I figure out something else that I missed when I talked
Yes,
about before. And I've
yes,
been talking about my story since like for years, right? And
yes,
so
yes.
it's part of your healing process as well. But I definitely don't disassociate. I'm very much very confident in my narratives, and I know that me speaking about them in a very trauma informed way as well is helpful for other people to hear who have had
Yes,
similar stories.
yes.
Sometimes that actually creates this opportunity, those like those spontaneous moments where you just
Hmm.
jump into something. I remember I was speaking about the sexual abuse that I witnessed, or that I witnessed and experienced, and in 2017, I finally, or 2016, I finally went to the police after 20 years, and in
Wow.
2017, I went to the trial, and I had spoken about that process, and even though these the system is not for survivors really.
Hmm.
I still found solace in that
Hmm.
process. Even though it wasn't necessarily the outcome that I was looking for, I still got an outcome that I wanted anyways. The fact that, the perpetrator, his face was plastered everywhere. Now I know he would never do this again, and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
While I was speaking about these things, one of the young ladies who was listening, spontaneously that day she went to the police to
Wow.
actually talk about what she went through when she was a child. So you just
Hmm.
never know who's listening and what type of spark
Exactly.
will entail.
Exactly. So, well, first of all, I don't even know what to say. Congratulations, but I mean that's powerful because a few of us, or a lot of us, or however many people have been exploited or abused, and just don't see going to the police after 20 years and saying, hey, this is what really happened. I'm strong now. I can deal now. I'm going to not only have his face plastered, but now you've exposed your own life.
Mhm.
Where does forgiveness come in with this?
Mhm. There's this saying, right, that you should be forgiving people because you don't want to store, bad energy, but I don't believe in that. You don't have to forgive everybody. No, I will never forgive that person, and I'm fine with that. But
Yep.
in terms of forgiving the way that my mother responded to me by saying to shut up and not to make up stuff and whatever, that's still a ongoing process. But in my heart, I have forgiven her, but there's still some resentment, right? Forgiving other people who failed me. I've done that. And also forgiving myself, right?
Yes.
For feeling guilty for not saying anything because I found out
Yes.
later that this person had also molested his niece after he didn't have access to me. And I felt guilty about that for so many years because I thought if I had gone when I was like 8 years old, she would not have been a victim of his. And a survivor. And so I carried that guilt on my shoulders for so many years, and I had to forgive myself for that. But forgiveness is not you have to earn the privilege to be forgiven in my world. And that person hasn't, and they never will. Neither has his family. But like I said, forgiveness, we like to think that, you should forgive everybody, but that's not true because that's also gaslighting your true narrative. And you have to hold space for yourself and your truth. And sometimes forgiving
Absolutely.
people means that you're not holding space for yourself.
Well, do you find that has this impacted your relationships or partnerships or your experience with sexual abuse and homelessness and so on? Has that impacted just your experience in general? And even though no question you are a powerful woman, but has there been an impact on relationships for you, for instance?
100%. And I mean, statistically, if you think about it, people who have experienced all these adversities, multiple adversities, chronic trauma, complex trauma, the way that I have, their relationships and the way that they move in relationships and the way that they're respected or not respected in relationships, they're all impacted. And I was in a very violent relationship for 11 years. Starting from when I was in high school. And eventually I was actually taking care of my abuser, who became an alcoholic. And then I was supporting him, like basically bathing him and everything because his organs were dying. And then he passed away about 5 years ago. And so, if I hadn't gone through those things, I would have had more likelihood of picking up on red flags and not attaching myself to the littlest love that is being given to me. And now I know, right? But back
Yeah.
then, and then people are, there's, battered wife syndrome, right? There's different things and factors that play a role for why women and men don't leave abusive relationships, right? It's very complex. And so for me, I'm very proud of the way that I carried myself throughout, regardless. I was putting myself through my master's program, my bachelor's program, and everything. No one knew what was happening until after he passed away. And now it's part of the narratives that I talk about, right? But in terms of relationships, of course, there's people pleasing, attaching
Yeah.
to the littlest bit of love that is given to you because nobody has shown you what love is.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
Craving
What
for
is
love.
love?
Right.
Craving. What
Yeah.
is love? I mean, we all have this, whether the childhood or the
Yeah.
movie version or whatever version we have of love, but it all, success starts from within. Love starts but if we don't know what that's about, it's very hard to acknowledge, oh, I have to kind of love myself first.
Yeah.
Why am I looking for this outside validation? But we do until we know better.
Yeah. And also, in order to know better, you need to have community care, right?
Yes,
We're
community.
talking,
Yes.
you might want to plug in your PC. Ooh, I don't know what that was. I have no idea what that's about. But
Ooh.
in terms of like love and stuff like that, I think it's also very important to note that it's so important that like systemically and structurally, there's an onus on individuals to do the work, but then
Yes,
really community. And so part of learning to love yourself is actually having community around you who's showing you what love is and that you're lovable and so on and so forth. And we often forget the importance of community. We often forget the importance of who we surround ourselves with. We often
that's
forget
just,
the
yes.
importance of resources
Mhm.
and services that are needed that oftentimes people from adverse backgrounds don't necessarily
Mhm.
have easy access to.
How did you stop defining yourself through trauma and self-destructive kind of behaviors? How do you get up and you say, "Okay, I've had enough of this"?
I think that, young people, anybody should be
Mm,
allowed to spiral down. Sometimes you got to hit
yes,
rock bottom to really know what rock bottom is.
true that.
And also to get things out of your system. So I remember when I exited the child welfare system, and once you exit, you really have a lot of time by yourself, and things just come at you, and all the trauma
Mm,
comes back, and so on and so forth. And I remember dropping out of my first college diploma program because I didn't feel like I was ready and had the capacity to do anything because I was so traumatized. And for that whole year, all I did was drink, party with my former best friend, like, and
mhm,
our circle, partied our asses off, drank, smoked weed, all these different things as a coping mechanism.
mhm,
And I got it out of my system. And after a year, I was like, okay, I'm going to go back to school now. And I ended up going into a different program, which was ended up being the social service worker program because I had more clarity about what I wanted to do. And then that catapulted me into getting my master's and my bachelor's right afterwards and doing all the
mhm,
work that I do. And if I
mhm.
didn't have that year, I'd be so lost. If I didn't have that year of really just like wilding out, I don't know where
Mhm,
I'd be right
mhm.
now. So we need to
That's
allow
interesting.
young people, especially, to make their mistakes, to learn from them, and also to figure out what their coping mechanisms are. Because after a year, I realized this is the worst coping mechanism ever. I need to stop, and I feel better anyways. But let me now focus on school.
Yeah, that's so interesting because that used to be the way youth used to do that. You'd finish high school and then you'd have that
The leap year,
year
yeah,
off, and people would
gap
go
year.
to Europe and backpack and all this stuff and figure themselves out and all that. That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
And
So
this is
you had to.
after I did a leap year. So I went back to
Oh,
school for another
you did a
year.
leap year and then another leap year.
Yeah, because I thought I wanted to do television radio broadcasting, and the
Ah.
school the school in Canada, the only school had that program. So I ended up doing that program, and then I realized this is more of a hobby. But I love using my voice. I want to be a broadcaster. I want to be a reporter and all this other stuff. And then after that year is when I was like, my mom. My biological mother, it was when I first started to really talk to her again, and she wanted me to do dental. And I didn't want to do dental, but I ended up going into dental because I'm people pleasing. I want her love.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I ended up going in there, and then I dropped out like, 3 months after because it wasn't for
Hmm.
me, number one.
Hmm.
I don't have the stomach to see pus in people's mouths. Like it's just not for me. Uh,
Oh,
and number two, that was when I realized like I'm just like I'm a hot mess. Like I need to like sweat this all out, And I just did what I knew how to do because that's what I was doing when I was like 13, 14 years old, right? With my former best friend. And I needed that year. And after that year, I was focused and I was able to really, um, I wouldn't say thrive. I was still in survival mode. I'm still in survival mode, right? But
uh-huh.
I was in a better footing to be able to focus on school a little bit more. And obviously, I had other supports in terms of the Children's Foundation of Canada providing me with scholarships that, took away some of that burden as well, right? The financial burden of schooling as well.
Hmm. Well, I want to touch on that a little bit because I know that is out there. Why do you think, and I've been told that a lot of youth don't take advantage of that?
I don't know if it's about taking advantage of it. I think that actually no, scratch that. I don't think statistically, I
Hmm.
know that many of our young people aren't necessarily ready to really do post-secondary till later in life. It's not the fact
Right.
that they don't want to. They have other shit that they need to take care of. People
Hmm.
are adulting more than other people who come from families, like statistically speaking. We have
Hmm.
to think about rent. We have to think about, how to survive, how to live,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know, how to be independent, while also carrying trauma and PTSD and so many other things, and not necessarily being provided with the care and support that we require.
Hmm.
And so a lot of our young people are like, maybe even late 20s, early 30s, now fully ready to start school. But there's
Oh,
many
that's
of
good.
us who have started school right after high school as well, right?
Oh,
So it
that's
just depends
wonderful.
on every young person, and not every young person from child welfare has the same experience after care. But these are some of the experiences that are, experienced.
Hmm. So when you reach out to how do you do this? You're reaching out to young people. Is it in a group situation, or because I know you're a professor, I know you do uh, work in the community and with Children's Aid. What is the Advancement Coalition that you're
So the
CEO of?
the Ontario Children's Advancement Coalition was born in 2018, I would say. Yes, 2018. And that was the
Hmm.
year, if I'm correct, I might get the year wrong, but if I'm correct, that was the year that the Ontario Provincial Advocate's Office was slated to be terminated by the provincial government at the time. And
Hmm.
so I thought to myself, I remember hearing it in the news and I was like, wait, what's going on? And I called the former advocate, the chief advocate of Ontario at the time, and I was like, hi, like, how come you didn't tell me this? And he said that he is finding out, along with everybody else, his fate. And I was like, wait, what? And I felt grief at that moment because I know that even though that office wasn't perfect, it was still a gathering space for a lot of people. And there was a lot of good work that was being done from that office as well. And I worked at the office at the time. So I was working at the Ontario the OPAC or the OCA office, sorry. And I was the engagement lead for the Provincial Health Rights Initiative at the time. And
Hmm.
I remember thinking, this is horrible. This is not good for the young people, especially who were connected to that office, who were part of projects, who were volunteering and who were building community within that office. And so I
Hmm.
thought to myself, this is not right. I got connected to another young person who was also worried. We ended up in the basement of a community health clinic, with about 20 young people. We just put it out there. We're like, hey, if anybody wants to grieve, just come out. So we had about 20, 25 people who came out. And after the first two meetings that we had, I said, we could do something about this. Does anybody want to do something about this? And we ended
Hmm.
up creating a kind of like quasi protest rally movement. And we ended up at Queen's Park, had a very successful rally with a lot of speakers. We also partnered with another organization or institution for a
Hmm.
press conference at Queen's Park at the legislature. And basically, that was kind of like the baby steps that precipitated OCAC into being what it is right now. And through that process in the beginning, the 20 people turned into 5 people, then 4 people, right? Like I always say, when you're working in groups, the right people stay.
That's
um,
right.
and
That's
the
true.
people who stayed ended up founding the idea of the Ontario Children's Advocacy Coalition.
Hmm.
And then finally in 2020, I think, there were three of us who then actually co-founded the Ontario Children's Advocacy Coalition. And grateful for the volunteers who were, part of the journey, of really thinking about what we were going to do. And then I think in 2021, we changed our name to the Ontario Children's Advancement Coalition. And what we do is really about advocacy and advancement of better outcomes for young people from the child welfare system and interconnected systems. And one of the biggest wins that we've had in recent times is that in 2023, last year of April, the Ready Set Go program in Ontario was implemented by the government. And that was because of the work that we did from 2020 onwards. When the pandemic hit, we started doing town halls. We had Cindy Blackstock partner with us and collaborate with us in terms of funding the infographic that came out of the town halls. And then
Hmm.
from there, we wrote a letter published it, and then also sent it to the government. And because of all the media attention, we were all over the media like for a couple of months across
Mm-hmm.
Canada, but also abroad. And all that pressure amounted to us being at the table with the government. And then from 2021 until 2023, we had two different phases of going across Ontario,
Wow.
listening to young people and allies in terms of what needed to change, in terms of youth transitions and how to better it. And then in 2023, we implemented the Ready, Set, Go program, which is based on pillars. And basically, there's a lot of changes that happened. So young people are getting more money for stipends. I think back in the day, it was like $800, something like that. Now I think it's about $1,800. Plus, they can work full time. So foundationally, they're more stable that way. They're also more supported. So a lot of this work starts at 13 or 14 years old now, or maybe even 12. Whereas when I was growing up, you were told the year that you were aging out that you're being cut off. So
Yes.
there's been a lot of changes. So I'm very proud of, all the things that we've been able to accomplish.
Yeah, that is fantastic. You are just um, success from within. Definitely, you just exude all of that. And there, I have questions for you, but
Okay.
I have questions. I've got questions, Cheyanne. But we talked a little bit because you talked about trauma bonding. I know we're skipping a little bit, but trauma bonding, I felt that was very important to kind of touch on and to kind of bring that a little bit of focus to that for our viewers.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
trauma bonding is very important to know about,
hmm
to be able to identify. And a lot of the times when we put hurt people with hurt people, sometimes the connection is only that trauma, and that's what really bonds us. And for a certain amount of time, that's part of your survival, and that's part of our
hmm
story. That was part of my story as well. But after a certain point, you have to kind of identify whether this is a trauma bond and whether it's keeping you in survival mode, keeping you in a certain box that is preventing you from entering thriving or the potential to thrive. And, we talk about creating networks and groups for young people from adverse backgrounds, particularly the child welfare system, but no one talks about the importance of working with young people to help them understand what trauma bonds are so they could better identify it, and also address it if it is part of their reality. But we want to put everybody into a box and then think that it's going to be all easy peasy, but we're not thinking about the
hmm
impact that are long term. And a
hmm
lot of people who have been in trauma bonds, their healing journey is tough.
hmm
And they become stuck, right? Not everybody, but a lot of
hmm
people.
hmm
And
hmm
so I think that when we think about friendships, when we think about connections, when we think about family, when we think about any sort of connection that is close to you and in close proximity to you, you need to be able to have the skills and the capacity to understand what is bonding you. And, if that bond didn't exist, would you have a connection?
So, are we talking about therapists here, psychologists?
Um,
How do you how do you talk about that
every
with
young
young people?
person needs to be connected to a helper, so a therapist.
hmm
A therapist should also be reflective of what the young person needs and wants as well. So, for
hmm
example, if I am talking to, or let's talk about myself. When I was
hmm
younger, I did not want a brown worker. I didn't want a South Asian worker. I didn't want
hmm
anybody looking like me. And so a therapist who would be from the same background as me wouldn't have worked for me. I wouldn't have been receptive. And so
hmm
it's very important to ask young people what type of therapist, like what are the characteristics that you're looking for, because
hmm
then the trust building between the therapist and yourself becomes more successful in that way. And once you
hmm
identify the therapist, they should be having these conversations with you. But not a lot of people talk about trauma bonds even within sessions, right? So these are things
hmm
that should be talked about. And then also, like at a ad hoc kind of casual way, if you're mentoring people, you can introduce those types of conversations and have like casual conversations with younger people about these things. But it's very important that this topic is talked about, and that people are not just building programs to put people in, like drop everybody into a box together, but they're also addressing these types of concerns, to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that these connections are healthy, that these connections are able to sustain themselves as well, right? If they're
Mm-hmm.
healthy. And also that if they're not healthy and there needs to be an end date, a termination date for these relationships, that people have the capacity and the ability to be able to terminate those relationships when they need to be terminated as well.
Mm-hmm. One of the questions I have in my head is that if you're saying connecting youth with somebody that they might want to feel safe, how do you even know that? How, if somebody comes in, you're saying you didn't want to be with Tamil or something, but you're coming in, you don't even know what safety is. Not you, but youth are coming in not knowing what that even means. Who is safe? So
But
how?
young people may not understand fully what healthy safety is, because I put
Hmm.
myself in a lot of predicaments when I was younger that was not safe, but it was safe for me,
Yes, yes,
right?
yes. Hmm.
And I needed those spaces.
Hmm.
But even though a young person may not know what healthy space is, they know what they need. People are the experts of their lives. They know they are the driver of their bus or their car,
That's
and
true.
they know how they've had to navigate to get to the point to meet you or me or whoever. And so it's just being, having humility, and asking questions like, hey, like, in terms of, pairing you with somebody, like, how would you want them to be? Like, do you want them to
Hmm.
be older? Do you want a man, a woman,
Gotcha, gotcha,
gender
gotcha. I
queer?
see. Yeah,
Who
yeah,
would
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
like? Do you want somebody from your same background? Do you want
Hmm.
somebody who is, I don't know, if the person is queer, would you like somebody who's also queer, right? Like these are just questions to have humility about and to just ask them, and also believe that they know their life better than you know them.
I understand now. So I guess we're going to wrap up in a little bit, but just understand if you thought about your life like in the beginning and you had all of that, the white picket fence and the dog and the two parents and the car, and I know you can't truly answer that, but what do you think life would look like? Would that
Oh.
Cheyenne be this powerhouse woman, or growing up in a safe space and going to school and everybody's happy and all of that
Passion
stuff?
is rooted in adversity for a lot of people. If
Yes.
I did not go through my adversities, my passion for the things that I'm passionate about would not be in existence. And so
Yes.
if I was privileged, I think that I probably would have ended up being an accountant, or in the Tamil community, a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever. Um,
Dentist.
yeah, dentist, yes. And for me, I think that, I think life would have been better for me in terms of not necessarily
Having
experiencing the amount of
those
adversity that I've
things. Yes.
experienced.
Yes. Yes.
However, the things that I'm doing now, I wouldn't probably be doing because, part of my advocacy work began when I was 16 years old. And so my work began very, very early on. And that's why even now I'm like, I need to, like, I feel like I'm ready to retire because I've been in this for so
When you
long.
became part of the
Yeah.
solution, you suddenly became
Yeah.
part of this at an early age, and
Yeah. And my
just the
and my
gratitude.
and I think my the fact that I was able to be brought up in such eclectic spaces and being
Yes.
so open minded and also critical, right? Like, and also understanding what equity is. Like, I don't think I would have understood all these things to the extent that I understand them because of who I am now if I had all those things given to me. Power and privilege puts blinders and rose-colored glasses on you until somebody tells you that no, this is not how it is, for a lot of people. And so I believe you should not be romanticizing adversity ever. Never be like, oh, but if you didn't go through this, you wouldn't be doing all these things. That is wrong, 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 wrong. But what I will say is that through my perseverance and determination and my ability to navigate the spaces based on the little resources that I have brought myself to this point, and I'm very proud of myself.
Oh
But it's
yes.
inexcusable for the bullshit that I experienced in my life.
Hmm. Well, That is a wonderful note to end on. So I know you say a lot of things to young people. What is the one thing because it's young people internationally here. So
Yeah.
what's one thing that people who are in an outraised position or just youth in general, actually. Let me
What
say
was a
that.
message for them?
Yeah.
I think that a lot of times when young people go through adversity, and as a survival of suicidality myself,
Yes, me
I
too.
think that
Yes.
we hit certain bottoms where we feel like we want to end things, and
Yes.
feel like we can't see a future. And
Hmm.
something that I learned, and I keep relearning this, right? Is the fact that like the 8-year-old me who wanted to end their life, the 13-year-old me who wanted to end their life, the 18-year-old me who wanted to end their life, 21, 25, all those people are glad that I'm here. And I'm showing all those inner children who still live inside me
Oh, it's
that,
beautiful.
they're what you do have a future. And I don't want you to get too stuck. It's okay and it's definitely valid to be stuck, right? Depending on what your
Yes.
circumstances are.
Yes.
Definitely, that's a reaction, that's a response, right? That's a healthy
Yes.
response
Yes.
because
Yes.
you are being violated, but just know that there's so much life ahead of you.
Yes.
And to believe in yourself because everybody, like, we are not accidents. Even if you've been told you're an accident, we each and
Deserve to be here. You're
yes, we all
supposed to
deserve to
be
be
here.
here. You're supposed to be here.
You're
Everybody
supposed to be
here
here.
is a supernova, and everybody here has a purpose, and there's so much waiting for
Yes.
you. So hold on.
Yes. Oh, I thank you for that. That's beautiful. That's just beautiful, Cheyenne. And I said that's your last statement. I just want to reflect that when you talk about suicide, that was me at 10 years old. And it was just recently I realized I didn't want to die. I
You wanted
wanted
help.
people to grieve. Somebody
Yes,
grieve. I wanted you to feel bad. I wanted whoever they were, the biological mother. I wanted somebody to love me in a way that I
yes.
wanted, So I understand that. I appreciate your voice so much for being here, and I'm sure a lot of adults as well, hearing, trauma bonding and just the awareness. So thank you so much for saying yes, and just thank you for your power, girl. Thank you
Thank
for your
you for having
power.
me. Thank you
Yeah.
for having me.
Aw, thank you, Cheyenne. And I'm sure I'll talk to you at some point down the road because, you are. And do not retire. You are not ready to retire.
Thank you, Sharon Lee.
All right. Be well. Thank you.
Thank
God
you.
bless. So that was our CEO, Cheyanne Ratnam. Please reach out to her. Please reach out to her. And if you find, as a youth, you find yourself struggling, especially if you're in Ontario, but wherever you are, there are individuals out there who are ready to help you, communities. Reach out. Reach out. And this is a community where you can bring your voice. So I thank you, and I wish you safe journeys in your life and stay blessed. And we'll see you next time.